Midlife has a serious branding problem. It has the word crisis attached to it. But what if we rebranded it to chrysalis instead of crisis? Research shows that people actually get happier, wiser, and grow more emotional intelligence as they age. Self-awareness, compassion, and resilience actually get stronger. And that's particularly starting in the transformational midlife years. But we have to believe it can actually happen for it to begin. This is the Real Personal Branding Podcast, and I'm Lauren V. Davis. And on this podcast, I have conversations with guests who share their real stuff, their personal stories, insights, celebrations, sometimes even the chaos they've faced while building their authentic and powerful businesses. Today, my guest is Chip Conley, who's on a midlife mission. After disrupting the hospitality industry twice, first as the founder of Joie de Vivre Hospitality, the second largest operator of boutique hotels in the US, and then as Airbnb's head of global hospitality and strategy, Conley co-founded the Modern Elder Academy in January of 2018. MEA is the world's first midlife wisdom school dedicated to reframing the concept of aging. MEA supports students to navigate midlife with a renewed sense of purpose and possibility. As a New York Times bestselling author, Conley's seventh book, Learning to Love Midlife, 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age, is about rebranding midlife to help people understand the upside of this often misunderstood life stage. Let's talk to Chip. Welcome to the Real Personal Branding Podcast. I am thrilled to be joined today by honestly quite a luminary in the world of personal growth and aging with grace, and someone that I personally love following, and that is Chip Conley. Chip, it is an absolute pleasure to have you with us here today.
Thank you, Lauren. Great to be here.
Thank you. And as a hands-on personal branding consultant and business coach who really just loves that raw and real personal development, I've admired your work not only because of how you've challenged societal norms and reshaped perceptions about midlife and aging, but also being able to just watch you build your personal brand in such a genuine and warm and authentic way. It's really inspiring to me also as a business owner, as an entrepreneur. Anyone who has read your books or attended one of your retreats through the Modern Elder Academy or heard you on a podcast or seen you on a TV interview gets to hear your honesty and your story, and that is really special in today's world. So I just wanted to reflect that back to you.
Oh, thank you. I mean, you never know. Your reputation precedes you, meaning the cosmic bellhop takes your luggage and your reputation and delivers it to the place you're going to be tomorrow, and they already know you in advance. So you never know whether your baggage smells or if it's actually got a good fragrance from Paris.
That's a really great way to look at it. We're going to talk about today your newest book, which is Learning to Love Midlife. And the tagline is 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age. It's really becoming a guiding light of navigating some of those complex ideas around the transformative age of life that people call midlife. And we're going to talk about that today. The first question I ask everyone on this podcast, though, is how are you doing for real?
That's interesting. When I wrote a blog, I have a daily blog, and I wrote a blog post a few months ago saying, I am raw and imperfect. So when people ask me that question, that's my sort of rote answer. Instead of the rote answer, I'm fine, I just say I'm raw and imperfect. And it's actually a beautiful way to put it because I want to be raw. I think raw is so much better than cooked. It means that there's still a lot ahead of me if I'm raw, and imperfect is a great way to both be humble, but also manage expectations. Because especially, as you get to be a little bit more of a celebrity, and my book, hit #1 on the charts for happiness and self-help books on Amazon, what? People will build up an expectation of who I am. And I am so imperfect that I want to make sure that everybody knows that.
That's such a perfect example of what I just said about how honest you are, and thank you so much for that real answer. I would love to catch up my listeners on some of your story. So you founded
Mhm.
this amazing thing called the Modern Elder Academy. You are an esteemed author, as you just mentioned. You are also so much more than that. You have an incredible story of how you got here today. And on the Real Personal Branding podcast, we love to share those stories from point A to point B because nothing happens in the blink of an eye, nothing happens overnight. Can you share a little bit about your founder story and what has inspired your work and even what's inspired the term modern elder?
Sure. I'm going to go way back to when I was 26 and I started a boutique hotel company, one of the first in the US. And it's called Joie de Vivre, means joy of life in French. And I loved it for 22 of the 24 years I owned and operated that business as CEO. And the last couple of years just sucked. I hated it. Not just the business, but everything in my life was going wrong. I was having a midlife crisis, and when I say midlife crisis, I meant like just like everything was going wrong. And I didn't like my life. And I had an NDE, a near-death experience where I had an allergic reaction to an antibiotic, which was a great wake-up call for a hotelier to say like, hey, is your life working? And at age
Yeah.
50, I'd sold the business and I was not sure what was next. And I went into my 50s, and in my 50s, and the first couple of years of my 50s, I had what I call a midlife atrium. I had time to reflect and sort of reimagine my life. And then I got asked by the founders of Airbnb to become their modern elder, someone who's as curious as they are wise, be it to be their in-house mentor for what turned out to be 7.5 years. And it was a beautiful experience. And it really taught me, okay, midlife is the best of times and the worst of times. I loved my 50s. I hated my late 40s. And I was really curious about how we could help people reimagine and repurpose themselves. And that's what led to creating the Modern Elder Academy, MEA, the world's first midlife wisdom school, with a campus in Baja, an hour north of Cabo San Lucas on the beach, and now a campus opening this spring in Santa Fe, New Mexico, on 2,600 acres.
Wow. And just as a reference point, my dad has actually been to one of your retreats, the one in Mexico, and it was life-changing for him. So I know the experience of being around other people who are also kind of in their next act and building something around who they are is really, really special. Today, I want to talk about your book, Learning to Love Midlife, 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age. Why do you believe that through your experience with your near-death experience, through your experience with Airbnb, through your experience being a hotelier, why do you think that this is such an important topic for people to learn about?
Well, let's talk. I mean, you talk about branding and personal branding. Let's talk about the brand of midlife. It's the
Yeah.
worst brand of any life stage. It has crisis attached to it. So who would want crisis attached to their brand? And the reason for that is it's weird, is that in mid 1960s, a Canadian psychologist wrote a white paper that was focused on just a handful of men, and it just went viral. So it's very weird, the whole thing about midlife crisis. And
Wow.
so long story short is that I just found that, I was five male friends to suicide, ages 42 to 52, between 2008 and 2010. And I was going through a hard time myself, as I mentioned earlier. And I just really felt like somebody needs to like help us to see that on the other side, the bridge over troubled waters, you get to the other side, and the other side's actually pretty good. The U curve of happiness, social science research shows that generally speaking, after age 50, we get happier with each decade until we die.
Hmm.
So I was like, okay, and that was true for me. I had a really rough 40s, second half of my 40s, and then 50s were great. So I wanted to help people to see that midlife may not be a crisis, it might be a chrysalis. And a chrysalis being, the midlife of the butterfly journey. And it's dark and gooey and solitary, but it's also where the transformation happens. So I wanted to popularize that idea. I also wanted to popularize the 12 reasons why life gets better with age, which is the subtitle of the book, because we're very familiar with what doesn't get good with age. Like what gets worse? Your body gets worse, your short-term memory gets worse. There's a bunch of things that get worse. And Hallmark cards will tell you what those are, because as you get older, your Hallmark cards are made to, be ageist and funny at the same time. But long story short is I thought, wow, if Becca Levy at Yale is right, and she said that her research has shown that when people move from a negative to a positive perspective on aging, they get 7.5 years of additional life.
What?
Well, yeah, no, you get more additional life by shifting your mindset on aging than you do by stopping smoking at 50 or starting exercise at 50. So I felt like, darn, we have such an anti-aging industrial complex out there to especially make women feel badly about their natural aging process. Why can't we have a pro-aging message that helps people to see the unexpected pleasures of what gets better with age? And that's really why I started MEA, the Modern Elder Academy. And it's why I wrote this book, because after having over 4,000 people from 47 countries come to Baja to one of our workshops, it's like I've had a laboratory there, a living laboratory.
Yeah, I'm sure you get to see so many people in this transformative age that it can only add to your research.
Yeah. I mean, it's both at this point, I have both the quantity, like the data points, and I also have the quality in terms of like, anecdotes and people's narratives and stories. So it's beautiful.
Oh, so wonderful. I'm 36 as we record this podcast right now. I have plenty of friends that are turning 40 this year. So I have this like almost like a cloud around me of people saying like, well, I'm 40, I'm turning 40, or like, and I have plenty of friends that are older than that too. So many of them dread this number though. I personally, I don't feel that I'm dreading it necessarily. The only thing that I feel is that I worry that like life is getting shorter and like I feel like I have so much that I want to do. How do you think society's perception of aging contributes to some of these negative stereotypes that are often associated with midlife or 40s and beyond? What can
Yeah.
people actually do to actually shift this perspective in themselves?
There's no doubt there's a societal narrative on aging, which is don't do it. And it's based upon the premise like, okay, you cannot be aging and growing at the same time. When it comes to a redwood forest, we talk about old growth redwoods, but we don't talk about old growth humans. Because we somehow think that at some point you stop growing and you start aging. But the truth is, we're both aging and growing our whole lives. So part of what we have to do is help to shift our mindset. And you can do that by reading a book like mine or coming to an MEA workshop or just hanging out with people who are curious and passionately engaged in what they do. And they want to try new things. And having curiosity and a passionate engagement in life and an openness to new experiences, those are very correlated to living a longer, healthier, happier life. Having great relationships and being able to have social wellness, not just personal wellness, but social wellness, so that we feel deeply connected to the people that we spend our time with. That's really important. So long story short is, while there's not a lot of social support out there around a pro-aging message, hanging out with people who are engaged in what they love doing and they're constantly exploring new things, I promise as someone said to me once, when I meet someone who's curious and passionately engaged in what they do, I don't notice their wrinkles. I notice their energy. And
Mm.
and so that has a lot to do with it.
Ooh, I want to live my life that way. I want people to notice my energy. That's for sure. How do people stay curious? How can you stay curious?
Yeah, curiosity is not an efficient thing. So if you don't have a lot of time in your life, it's hard to be curious because curiosity takes time. Curiosity is something that opens up possibilities, and it's beautiful. So it's going into a relationship. It's everything from, for me, when I go for a walk with my dog in nature, I'll say, hey nature, what do you have to teach me today? And
Ooh.
that's being curious. But going to a party and saying, you know what, I'm gonna actually wear my curiosity hat today. And when I go to the event or to this party, I'm just going to be exceptionally curious about everybody I meet. I'm going to try not to be judgmental, which is easy to happen at a party. And I'm going to be just curious, and let's see what happens. What you will find is, if you start being curious, and curiosity means asking questions, being thoughtful, being, sort of really present with the person you're talking to, you will find you'll have better conversations. And of course, you're going to find that people love you because you're curious about them. And ever since Dale Carnegie taught people to say like, hey, the best thing you can do to make friends is to actually ask people about themselves. And he was right. I mean, he was sort of like a bit of a American huckster on some level too. But the bottom line is, people love it when someone's curious about them. So just know curiosity, if you have a hard time being curious because it's a muscle you haven't been using since you were 8 years old, then hang out with some young people. I promise you. And when I say young people, I don't mean teenagers. I actually mean people who are, 8 years old or younger, and listen to the questions they ask and
Mm.
start learning from them.
My favorite networking, I hate the word hack, but it's my favorite networking hack is that, because I'm totally an introvert, but I do like people. I just charge up alone, of course. But like sometimes I have to like work myself out up to get out to a party or a networking event. And that truly is how I've made every connection that I've had in business, is just by talking to people. And it
Mm-hmm.
inspired this podcast actually, because so many people tell me I ask them great questions. And when used to be paralyzed with fear of going to a different networking event, I taught myself that if I can ask people 2 questions after they tell me the first thing that they're going to tell me about themselves, if I ask them one question based on what they just told me, and then based on their answer to that, I ask them one more question, I get so much more out of that conversation myself, and they feel so validated and so heard. And so I always ask the 2 follow-up questions. And when I do, what happens is by the time I'm done asking them that follow-up question, somebody else walks over and I'm able to say, hey, do you know so-and-so? They do all
Yeah.
of this great stuff. And then they feel even cooler because now they're being introduced by someone. Now they have a friend at this event and they have someone who really understands them. And it's just absolutely the best thing that I've ever learned to do as somebody who would be on the outside of a networking event usually. People don't believe me when I say that, but it's so true. And so just to back that up, it works. It definitely works. Can you share a personal experience where you felt that the wisdom that you gained with age or years under you has maybe significantly influenced a decision or a perspective in your life, that's given you more perspective on why life gets better with age?
Yeah. I mean, I think the process of becoming the modern elder to the founders of Airbnb was an interesting thing because I had been CEO of my own company for 24 years at the boutique hotel company, and I sold it at the bottom of the market. I was done with it. I should have stuck around longer, but I was just so done with it. And so I didn't know what was next. And then I joined Airbnb. And my first lesson, was, oh, I'm supposed to be the modern elder here. And yet I was surrounded by people who were smarter than me, brilliant around technology. And I, at 52 at that point, had no background at all in technology. And also, I was used to being the CEO and sort of like telling everybody what to do. And when there were stories about my company, it was stories about me. And all of a sudden, I was like
Mm.
in a place where I was no longer the sage on the stage. I was the guide on the side. I was the person who was the CEO whisperer, helping Brian Chesky, the CEO and co-founder, to be the best leader he can be. So I had to really right size my ego. And I think that what a beautiful time in my life for that to happen, because I do
Mm.
believe that the first half of our life, our primary operating system is our ego, and there's nothing wrong with that, except for sometimes it gets out of the way, out of control. But it's around midlife that we have a primary operating system change, and our primary operating system moves from our ego to our soul. And what does that mean? It just means that we are more internally focused and a little bit less self-obsessed and more interested in how we're making a difference for others. And so for me, that really was a beautiful awakening to like, oh, that's that's how I'm supposed to be in my life, the second half of my life. And in fact, my work, going to work with Airbnb almost forced it upon me. So yes, all good.
I know you talk a lot about emotional intelligence inside the book and how that comes with age and how people are navigating midlife and beyond. Are there any sources of emotional intelligence that people forget about, or any ways that you can
Mm.
share that people start bringing, like how do people build emotional intelligence over time through age?
There are a few things. Number one is, as we get older, we are more self-aware,
Mm,
self-reflective. Frankly, we understand our pattern recognition. We understand, how we show up sometimes not in the best ways. And we can sort of see, okay, guess what? I can see that personality trait, that trigger coming up right now. And then you can adapt. So you're less reactive, you're more responsive. And therefore you don't like lose it as much as you do when you're younger. You're more compassionate. That's a quality that gets better with age, partly because you have been through your own troubles and you can sort of understand other people's. Now, let's be clear, there's a bunch of cranky old aunts and uncles and people who don't fit this profile. Like there's lots of people who don't fit this profile. I'm talking averages here. On average, this is accurate. And another thing that's really true about emotional intelligence as we get older is we roll with the punches better when there's negative things that happen in life. And this is really good data where, in fact, in the book, I actually talk about this, about, when you show older people versus younger people, something that's really savage and difficult, when you're younger, it afflicts you more and it has a longer term effect on you. When you're older, it's not that you don't like notice it. You actually try to actually understand the rationale for it and to create a story around it so that it doesn't, just feel quite as viscerally negative. And so, yeah, so what happens, I mean, the truth is, if we get happier as we get older, and yet there's a lot of circumstances that get worse as we get older, then something must be changing because, it's like we're dealing with death more as we get older, and yet we get happier as we get older. So what's going on there? It's part of it is the fact that we know how to roll with the punches. And when you're 14 years old and your best friend breaks up with you, I'm never going to be the same. You know,
yeah.
people, you don't say that at 54 years old. And, so you learn how to actually deal with bad news.
Yeah. And I know that you mentioned earlier some stuff about relationships and how a lot of people really focus on the health side of growing older. They focus on like physically how they feel, but I know that you talk about this key lifestyle factor of improving your relationships and digging deeper into your relationships as you age and community as you age. You talk about a lot of this in the book. What advice do you have for individuals who are looking to deepen their relationships in midlife? Like, particularly as they're navigating changes in friendships or relationships
Yeah.
or improving their health in that community sense as they age?
Well, first I would say, think of friendship as a practice. So you practice something to get better at it. So
Mm-hmm.
you practice music, maybe making music, you practice some kind of sport or exercise. Ultimately in business, you practice law, you practice medicine. So practicing friendship means learning how to get better at it over time. And it means investing in friendships, investing in what I call social wellness. And for a lot of people, they don't think of it that way. And in fact, their friendship muscle atrophies. It often atrophies in their 20s, 30s, and 40s because they're so busy. They may be creating a family, they may be having kids, who knows what they're doing. But it's very true that people feel like, wow, their scope of friendships actually, it tightens and is smaller. And this is particularly true for men. So women are much better at being socially adept and being vulnerable and having relationships with other women who can provide sort of emotional insurance. You have property and liability insurance for your home. You might as well as have emotional insurance for your own life for a rainy day. So for men, they like, wow. I mean, the number of friendships they have really by the time they get to their 50s can be really small. So it means like, okay, it's like you haven't worked out. It's time to go to the gym. And, at first it may be a little awkward, but you sort of get used to it and then you start liking it. And that's what friendships can be. And I would say the number one thing to look at is whether it's looking in the past from people you went to college with, or, you first worked with and reconnecting with them, or it's actually looking currently in your life. Like who are people or what are interests you have that you'd love to dive deeper into? And there might be some affinity groups where you could, get to know about photography or playing pickleball or, you know, political activism for climate change. And you want to just like, okay, I'm going to dive into that and I'll make some friends along the way.
Is that one of the most important things as you're growing, or is it, how important are these relationships? How important are these friendships and community as you age?
It's exceptional. The many studies, Blue Zones, Stanford Medical School, Harvard's 85-year long longitudinal study, all say the same thing. The number one variable for living a longer, healthier, happier life is how emotionally connected are we? How much we invest in our social relationships in
Mm.
midlife and beyond. So it's really important.
Yeah, thank you for that. I have always felt like that to be true in my own life. When I isolate myself, or when I've been really stressed, or when I was going through my divorce even, I really realized the power of relationships and community. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had no choice but to just lean on people. And
Mhm.
when I did lean on people, I felt like my life got substantially better. And it was beautiful and communal to have those people around me, and just to show me that there is more to life, and that life goes on, and just to take it one step and one day at a time. So I think that's really interesting, and I do think I'm better for it. I think I'm stronger and more emotionally intelligent for it as the years go on. So I appreciate that advice, and I'll definitely take that with me. I talk to a lot of clients about feeling aligned with who they are as they're telling their story. A lot of people I work with are kind of taking this step maybe in their second act. And they feel like they've been given all of this advice of how they should show up online, how they should market themselves, how they should be a certain way. And when they don't show up aligned, when things feel forced and they can't show up as themselves, their marketing shows it. The way that they show up in their business shows it. How can individuals reflect on their values and their goals and ensure that they're living within their desired legacy, as you call it in the book? What steps can they take to leave a nice positive impact on future generations?
One of there's again Eric Erickson who came up with an interesting quote. He said, "I am what survives me," and I think he said that's something that we should all consider after age 50. And it really speaks to legacy, but legacies can sometimes feel like a capital L legacy can be scary. It's like, ooh, I don't have my name on a building,
Yeah.
or I have not written a book. A small L legacy means you've had an impact in ways that are small and quiet and sometimes incredibly moving for people. David Brooks talked about, as we get older, we need to look at our eulogy, not our resume. Um,
Oh,
and and so how are you showing up in a way where people are going to show up and at your funeral and give a eulogy for you? So a lot of it comes down to this idea of, what impact am I having out there in the world? When I was a business person, we used to talk about ROI, return on investment. But as I get older, I focus on a different kind of ROI, ripples of impact. And so then you have to ask the question, in what ways do you want to have an impact? I've chosen with MEA by creating the Modern Elder Academy and having so many people go through it as a transformational experience. I've chosen to say, like, I want to have impact by helping people in their midlife rethink the rest of their life because I lost 5 male friends to suicide. And so I want to I want to be able to say, hey, I helped people to see new options, new opportunities, the potential in their life at age 50 or 55 or whatever the age is that they're coming, because they have a lot of life still ahead of them. I could also do this at 85. And frankly, we've had people 85, 88 even come to MEA. And that's beautiful too. But when you're doing it for someone at 50 or 55, they have a huge amount of life still ahead of them. They've
yeah.
probably at least half of their adult life still ahead of them if you start counting at age 18.
Who should come to MEA? Just to give a little plug to MEA, what kinds of people come
Yeah.
to these retreats? What types of people what are they building? What are they inspired by?
Well, let's start with why would a person come? So often a person comes when they feel stuck in midlife. They feel a
Mm.
little bit confused. They feel like they're not sure what's next. They're navigating some kind of transition, a divorce, selling a business, getting fired, menopause, empty nest, having their parents pass away, having a health diagnosis. So often someone who's sort of in the middle of a transition.
Mm.
We have had people from 47 countries come to MEA, so it's quite a diverse group of people.
Wow.
The average workshop has 20 to 24 people in it. So it's intimate. You over the course of a week, you really get to know each other. And it's about 62, 63% women. So more women than men. And although I think men get more out of it because quite frankly, it's an eye-opening experience for them because, you get vulnerable. And about 20, 25% people of color. So demographically, it's pretty broad compared to a normal retreat center. And then we've had people as young as 25 and as old as 88 and 54 being the average age. So it's about 75% of the people are between 45 and 65. And I think what they get out of it is they feel a deeper sense of who they are and and have a roadmap for how they want to live their life, which is something we desperately need in midlife. They also feel maybe more willing to become a beginner again,
Mm.
more open to trying things, having a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset. And they feel deeply connected to the collection of people they've just met and realize, my God, my friendships and the relationships I have in my life are much more shallow than I want them to be. And I want to show up in a way that I have this kind of experience in my life every week.
Oh, I love that. And they build community there. They build those friendships and
Yeah.
they get to practice those relationships, just as you mentioned before.
Tell us about what your father felt when he was there.
Oh, he was very excited about the programs that he was building when he came back. He felt very validated, I think, by the
Mhm.
people that were there, which, I can obviously validate him to the moon and back as his daughter, but it's nice to have other people who are also smart and who are also building things say, "Hey, I think what you're building is really cool." And I would love to be involved in any capacity, and I would love to share it with other people and spread the word. I've hosted
Mhm.
a few retreats myself, or co-hosted some retreats myself, and I know that when people walk away from those, I think the most important thing that we see in the feedback forms is that they feel understood and they feel
Mhm.
heard and they feel like they can take action because the things that felt like problems before that they had no one to talk to about are suddenly kind of melting away, or they feel less hard now that they've talked them through.
Mhm.
And I think from what I've experienced in just secondhand feedback, I think that your retreats are very important and very impactful to people in that way, that they feel finally understood by somebody. They feel finally heard and
Mhm.
validated, whether it's a business idea or whether it's just like what they're going to in their next stage of life, what they're going to take the next step on. That is really important that you're doing that for people of any age, all ages, but especially in this
Mhm.
very transformational time of their life.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you. Well, that's great to hear.
Yeah, of course. Okay, looking back on your own journey, the insights that you shared within this book, what message or takeaway do you really hope that readers will carry with them as they read this book, or even as they listen to this interview today? What's something that you want to send people away with?
I would love people to think that aging can be aspirational. Back in the day when George Washington and all those, founding fathers were around, they all wore wigs to make them look older than they were. Aging was aspirational because we had a society in which the power rested with old people. That's still true in Washington today, strangely enough. But the fact is, it's not necessarily true in the rest of life. The rest of life, people do not want to be older than they are or be perceived as older than they are because quite frankly, old is bad. And so I just want people to see like, not because I want to go back to being the founding fathers, we should not revere our elders as the primary thing that leads to why elders are respected because you have to do it. No, we should just know, hey, older people have something to offer, as do younger people. What we need more than anything is intergenerational collaboration like we've never seen before. So that's what I would say.
That brings up a great point. I am definitely one of those people who enjoys learning from other generations younger than me, generations older than me. Like, I feel like there's so much to learn from everyone. So I appreciate that point. And I also want to know, are you somebody who throughout your life has looked to all different generations to gain wisdom? Or is it something like after you kind of developed yourself into your, like within your 50s, is that when you started kind of looking at this stuff? Or have you always been interested in gleaning information and learning from previous generations, older generations?
I would say that, you know what, I was unconscious about how much I really learned from older people. I don't think I didn't actively seek it out. I think it's just sort of like, I loved it and I didn't value it until I really did value it. And then until I was frankly in the role of being the older person and I saw younger people like, oh, I want some chip time. I want to, you know, I had over 100 mentees over the course of 7.5 years at Airbnb. That's a lot. So I saw that, you know, there's a lot of value in being in a place where we can create that intergenerational transfer of, you know, of wisdom. You know, at Airbnb, I had a lot of EQ that I could bring to the table, emotional intelligence, but millennials had a lot of DQ, digital intelligence, and we learned from each other as a result of that.
Ooh, this is really exciting. I want to dig more into this. I'll have to dig more into this another time because I promised to get you out within the hour. But thank you so much for being on the podcast today. The one last question that I always ask everyone, well, is as long as I remember, I ask everyone. Sometimes I forget and then I'm like, dang it. But I would love to ask you, what is one myth that you would like to bust about something that you're passionate about? Maybe about aging, about midlife, about that transformation, or about anything in particular. You can say anything you want.
I think the myth I would like to bust is the idea that older people in the workforce are too set in their ways and unwilling to learn. I think there's truth in that with some people, but I think there's so many people who are older, let's say 50 or older, who realize that they don't want to retire at 60 or 65. So they better start learning and learning something new because the world's changing so fast. So, you know, one of my best friends is, you know, learning everything. He's in his, you know, mid 60s. He's becoming an expert on AI. And, you know, he's surrounded by people who are 25 and he's bringing something to the table that the younger people can't bring to the table. And they're bringing something that he doesn't know. So, you know, all that's, you know, just goes to say that the myth is that somehow older people don't want to learn. And I think that's wrong.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom with us today on the Real Personal Branding Podcast. I'm so happy you were here.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you for all the work you do.
That wraps up today's conversation with Chip Conley. Chip's research serves as a beacon of hope, offering such grace for rediscovery and purpose. I want to reflect some of the key takeaways from our discussion. Curiosity, passion, and openness to new experiences is essential for staying engaged and vibrant as we journey through life. Nurturing relationships and social connections is not only crucial for our happiness, but also for our overall health and well-being in later years. I can't believe it adds 7 years onto your life. And most importantly, I hope this episode has encouraged you to shift the perspective on aging. That intergenerational collaboration brings happiness to our lives. Today's conversation has been so inspiring, and I am so grateful that you're here. Thank you for listening. I hope you embrace curiosity, nurture your relationships, and view aging as a journey filled with endless possibilities. Talk to you next time.